Hey everyone, it's Patch 3.24 in Acropolis, and today I want to talk about a strategy that I don't really think many people know about. Today we're going to be talking about pre-map heisting, which is a very potent strategy to get you a little bit of chaos to get you going on whatever build you might want to play at the start of a season. Now, this is not Infinite Heist. If you know what Infinite Heist is, that has been unfortunately completely killed. But what this is going to be is a strategy that's going to revolve around buying contracts from the heist vendor every single time you level up, starting in Act 6. And because the heist contract vendor is going to refresh every time you level up, you're going to be able to stockpile somewhere around 30 to 40 contracts, which, if ran right before Kataba, can give you somewhere around 100 raw chaos and can give you quite a lot of additional raw currency, such as fusings, jewelers, chromes, and pretty much everything else you need to get going in maps without much of a hassle. And the nice thing about the strategy is if you're playing a build that kind of requires a little bit of gear to get going or might need a specific item to really be able to start off, you can very easily do it, as this strategy would only add about an hour to 2 hours of additional time before you can get yourself going into maps, as you want to before you enter maps. But you could realistically cut your time in here a lot shorter and just do it until you make exactly enough money to be able to get whatever you need, and then just move on to maps and start progressing towards red maps. Now, some examples of this might be, for example, let's say you need a Harem Sorrow because your build is some sort of cold convert build and you can't play it until you get it. It might be a good idea to come into heist, maybe go and do maybe 20 minutes total heist, get yourself 5-10 chaos to be able to afford on day one, and then just immediately start either playing your build or have a substantially easier time as you walk into maps. The other nice thing about this is if you're playing a build that requires somewhere around a 50 to 100 chaos swap to actually get going, well, this will very easily get you all that money that you actually need. And if you are going to do the chaos recipe, for example, which I have a whole guide for, which I'll link in the description below, you can potentially add additional 50 to 100 chaos worth of profit on top of all this, meaning you should have quite a decent amount of money to get you going. So the first thing we should talk about in this strategy is how do we actually get it going? So heist is not available to you until you get to Act 6. Now, previously, you used to be guaranteed a rogue sash in the first zone in Act 6, but unfortunately they've removed that to nerf this build a little bit. So the way to get this going is simply just going to be waiting for the first rogue sash to appear, which I would say most often not happens somewhere in Act 6. Or you're going to have to wait until you get yourself a rogue marker drop. Realistically, you don't need many rogue markers to get this going. And if you have a friend that's also doing the strategy and they get themselves a rogue marker drop, you could go ahead and borrow maybe 20, 30 rogue markers from them so you can get this going for yourself as well. Once you do manage to get yourself a rogue marker drop, it's going to be very simple to get this going. What you're going to want to do is immediately go to town and then immediately zone into the rogue harbor. Kurai is going to have a quest for you that's going to make you go and talk to every single heist member. And then once you accomplish that, there's going to be a new quest for you to go and talk to Kras, which is then going to give you a contract to run with Daya. Now you're going to want to run this contract immediately, as it's going to unlock the heist locker for you. And if you do not have the heist locker unlocked, you could potentially brick yourself by potentially making heist inaccessible if you accidentally put your rogue markers away in your heist locker. Now, to actually get this whole strategy going, it's going to be very simple. Every single time you level up, Wakano, the contract vendor, is going to fully reset his shop. That means every time you level up, you just want to very quickly go to town, come over to the Rogue Harbor, and very quickly go to him and buy contracts. Now, there's going to be 3 very specific contracts we want to buy. We're going to be looking to buy Demolition, Perception, and lockpicking contracts. In the description below, there will be a regex that you can copy and paste, which is going to specifically only showcase those contracts to you, making it very simple to actually buy them. Now, these contracts are either going to cost Chance Orbs or Orbs of Alchemy. Now, the Orbs of Alchemy ones are just not worth buying, as you're not going to have that many Orbs of Alchemy, but you should be able to sustain the majority of the chance orbs that you actually need to purchase all these. And one thing to mention to you as well is that you can always go to a vendor in town and convert any fusings that you get into chance orbs. Another thing that I might recommend, if you are not able to sustain the chance orbs and the fusings required to keep buying contracts every single level, is to actually just go ahead and run 1 or 2 lockpicking contracts ahead of time, as they give you quite a lot of raw currency, meaning you should be able to self-sustain your chance orbs and your fusings from that if you do want to make sure you buy everything. Now, this strategy is not going to assume that you're buying every single contract, and I'm going to assume you're going to maybe only be able to buy 60 to 70% of all demolition, perception, and lockpicking contracts, and I'm going to assume that you just don't have enough currency to actually buy everything, but even then, that's completely okay, and even if you have to skip a whole level, that is fine as well. You're still going to end up getting around 30 to 40 contracts by the time you get to Katava, meaning that you should get quite a lot of money out of this. Speaking of Katava, we want to run all these contracts specifically before Katava. You do not want to kill Act 10 Katava, as it's going to make a massive difference in the amount of total currency they actually get. Not only are you going to have less resistances, meaning you're going to be a little bit squishier, so you might have a little bit of a worse time in here, but specifically because you kill Act 10 Katava, the game considers you to be in maps now, meaning it's considering you having access to some League mechanics that are only available in maps, such as Metamorph, meaning that some of the chests that that normally spawn as question mark chests before you get to maps will instead spawn as the lead mechanic they're supposed to. These question mark chests, which are mostly going to be found in Perception, are where the real money actually comes from. Because they're trying to spawn as the lead mechanic you currently don't have access to, the game instead replaces those chests with question mark chests, which are just loaded with quite a lot of raw currency. If you do this right before Katava, which we're waiting all the way up to Katava so you can have all of your contracts bought up at once, you are going to get probably around 20 to 30 extra chaos just from having those question mark chests versus killing Katava and doing this after Katava. The other thing to mention about this whole strategy is that because these contracts are going to give you quite a little bit of XP, you're actually going to be able to walk into maps once you're done with the contracts a little bit over leveled, meaning that your first few maps should be substantially easier. So the TLDR gameplay loop of all this is going to be very simple. Get to Act 6, find your first rogue marker drop or get a few rogue markers from a friend, come over to the rogue harbor, unlock your rogue stash, and then simply just come over to Wakano and buy contracts every single time you level using the Regex to specifically buy lockpicking, perception, and demolition contracts. If you are struggling to maintain your chance orbs to be able to actually purchase all these contracts, simply go and swap your fusings for chance orbs at the vendor or do a few lockpicking contracts to get yourself a few fusings and chance orbs to keep being able to buy them. Once you get yourself to Act 10 Katava, come to the rogue harbor and run all these contracts to get yourself all the loot. And then once you have your loots, purchase whatever you need for your build, go kill Act 10 Katava and move on to mapping. The next thing we should talk about is how to actually run these contracts. They're going to be very simple. Once you go into a specific contract, you're going to see a multitude of small chests all over the area, as well as a few big chests on your minimap. You're going to be able to see the icon next to big chests so you know what kind of loots they're supposed to give you. And then at the end of the area, there's going to be a piece of big loot that you're going to be able to steal. All you're going to want to do is simply click on all the small chests as you progress all the way to the end of the zone. And then you're going to want to steal the big loot at the end before making your way back. Now, at the end of these vaults, there's going to be 2 saves in each zone. These saves, in my opinion, are really worth opening as they can give you a Chaos Orb, I would say around 20 to 30% of the time, making them actually give you a decent amount of profit. Ideally, you're going to want to make sure your alert level is going to be as close to full without going over. And what you could possibly do to get a little bit more loot is to steal 1 or 2 chests, trigger the lockdown, and then immediately rush to the end to steal the big loot before running out. You're going to have to steal the big loots because you can vendor it to Wakano to get more rogue markers, and you're going to need these rogue markers because it costs you rogue markers to actually start each contract. What I'd personally recommend is for about the first 2/3 of the contracts that you're going to run to actually go and steal the big item at the end so you build up a big stockpile of rogue markers. And then for the last third of the contracts that you have, just simply go and loot a bunch of chests, trigger lockdown, and then just walk out. You're going to have so many rogue markers, they're not going to care that you're not self-sustaining them by stealing the big loots. That's going to be completely fine because it should give you enough markers to be able to get through the rest of the contracts without running out of markers. The final thing to mention here is going to be the big chest. Now, every single time you see a big chest on the map with a question mark, you always want to make sure you loot it. This is going to give you a large amount of raw currency every single time you open it, and they're going to be the bread and butter of where most of the currency is going to come from. I would focus on any sort of currency chest that you see. And lastly, I would highly recommend to prioritize the jewelry chests if you're doing this with a chaos recipe in mind as well, as that's going to be the majority of the jewelry for your chaos recipe, which is typically the bottleneck to be able to do more of them. So one thing that might make this a little bit faster for you as well is to actually run the contracts in a very specific order. So out of the 3 contracts that we have, demolition is by far the slowest one. And that is simply due to the fact that you have to wait for Tibbs to walk up to the door and blow it up, and just really slow in comparison to Crass opening doors for lockpicking and perception. Because of this, I would recommend to run these as your last third, just so you can use all those rogue markers that you stacked up to be able to start the contract, lose all the different chests, trigger lockdown, and just walk out. A beautiful thing about Tibbs is you can open a free chest after lockdown is triggered, meaning you could just leave a big chest and have Tibbs open it, but running all the way to the end and then running out the big loot, in my opinion, is just really slow. So just do your perception and lockpicking contracts first, as they're really fast, and then just don't bother with the big loot for your demolition ones to save yourself probably around 10 to 20 minutes just waiting for the doors to open for demolition. Now, the final thing we should talk about is going to be the kind of loot that you can expect out of all these contracts. This is the loot from about 35 contracts or so. I purposely went and only bought around half of the contracts that I should have actually been able to obtain while doing this, simply because I want to simulate what bad luck would possibly look like. And as you can see, we got almost 100 raw chaos from doing this. This is going to fluctuate a little bit. It's going to be dependent on luck, but you can expect anywhere between 70 to 110 or so chaos, depending on how many contracts you're actually able to buy, depending on how many orbs of chances you're able to sustain, and 2, a little bit of luck as you're not always guaranteed chaos orbs to drop. But this money would be more than enough for me to potentially buy a 6 link or any sort of other uniques or any sort of other gear I might need to get my build going. And at the same time, as you can see, we got quite a lot of other really nice currency that make your mapping substantially easier. As you can see, we got 100 jewelers, 56 fusings, and 73 chromes, meaning I'm going to have a really easy time being able to change the links on any of my gear to get myself going in maps. And at the same time, I got 26 orbs of binding and 18 orbs of alchemy, meaning I should have no issues alcheming my maps as I'm progressing through the atlas. Finally, I got 37 orbs of regret, and you can sell these for 1 to 2 chaos each on day 1 of the season, meaning I could potentially turn this into an additional 40 chaos to invest into whatever I want, or I can simply use these to actually respec my build if my build requires a respec. Finally, I do get myself quite a lot of orbs of chances and obviously quite a lot of orbs of fusing, meaning, like I said earlier, you could potentially do a few lockpicking contracts to actually get this to be able to go over to Wakano and just buy yourself more contracts if you did need more contracts. With all this put together, in my opinion, I feel like this is the correct strategy for most people to do. Not only can you modify this to whatever needs you need, you don't need to spend a full 2 to 3 hours in here to get the full 100 plus chaos worth of total loot, but you could potentially just spend 20 to 30 minutes to get just enough chaos to buy whatever unique you need. Or if you do want to spend 1 to 3 hours in here, which is going to simply just be dependent on your build and how fast you can actually clear these contracts, you're going to be able to make a lot of money and be pretty set for the first and second days of the season. If you have any questions on strategy, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. I also stream every day on Twitch, so feel free to come by Twitch and ask your question there. I'll be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. At the same time, if you just simply want to come by and be a part of our community, I'd be more than happy to see you there as well. And with all that put together, I hope you kitties enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next video.